My mother clinked her wine glass and leaned in just far enough for everyone to hear. "Tell me, Cassandra," she said with a smile so polite it burned. "Do they still let you in the building? Or do you just hang around pretending you still matter?" The table erupted with laughter. My sister added a jab about me being unemployable, and my brother raised his glass to family who stay useful. I stared at the plate in front of me. A meal I hadn't touched, a seat I hadn't wanted in a house I no longer recognized. I had shown up to be polite, to prove I could take a joke, to maybe feel, for once, like I wasn't the punchline. But somewhere between the third insult and the fifth round of wine, I realized they hadn't invited me to reconnect. They'd invited me to watch them celebrate the life they thought I should have lived. They didn't just want to win. They wanted me erased. My silence, my distance, my refusal to play along. To them, that was failure. And then, just as I stood to leave, humiliated and done, a voice behind me broke the tension. "Excuse me," my assistant said, stepping in from the hallway, clutching a file folder. "We need to review the updated child welfare policy before tomorrow's press call, Madam Secretary." You could hear a pin drop. My mother's smile twitched. My brother's wine froze midair. And for the first time in years, I looked around that table and didn't feel small. Because in that moment they saw me not as who I was in their version of the story, but as who I'd fought like hell to become. I'm Cassandra Lowe, and everything you just heard? That was just the beginning. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say "listening" in the comments, or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reach. Sometimes, even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. And if this already made your heart ache even a little, don't forget to follow and subscribe. It's the kindest way to say, "I hear you." Thank you. And now, here's my story. I stepped into the Lowe family estate in Aspen, where everything sparkled under chandeliers and glowed with practiced opulence. It was my father's 70th birthday, but it might as well have been a society gala hosted by the state of Colorado. The violinist in the corner played something elegant. Champagne flutes clinked softly. Everything was perfect, except me. I wore a simple indigo dress. No label, no shimmer, just cotton and nerve. I knew I didn't belong in this room filled with satin, silk, and stone-cold stares. My sister Evelyn caught sight of me and wasted no time. Her smirk landed like a slap. "Well, look who clawed her way back. What rescue program sponsored that dress?" A few heads turned, a few mouths twitched. Then came the ripple of polite, poisonous laughter. I kept walking. My heels didn't click like theirs. They absorbed impact instead, like I'd spent years learning how to walk quietly through storms. I barely reached the drinks table before Uncle Murray chimed in, a glass of scotch in hand and bad memory in tow. "Didn't you drop out of Yale? What are you doing now? Helping retired prostitutes or something?" The laughter turned full-throated. I stared at the ice swirling in my water glass. I looked to my mother. Edith Lowe, 3-term mayor, the queen of crisis management. She met my eyes, then looked through me. "Cassandra always had a fascination with failure," she said, not unkindly, just clinically. Something in my chest cracked, just a little. The kind of crack you don't notice until cold air rushes in. Then Evelyn stood, champagne in hand, her voice theatrical, dripping with venom behind the lace. "A toast to the only Lowe who didn't finish college, doesn't own property, and hasn't achieved a damn thing, yet still manages to show up like she belongs." I smiled, just a small one, but inside, I was watching my life rewind. I had been the top behavioral psych student at Yale. Then I left. Voluntarily. I joined a refugee trauma center in Arizona. A year later, I had a breakdown so severe my mother had me committed. 1 month. Involuntary. Signed in by her own hand. I turned to leave. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of watching me shatter. But then, his voice. My father had been silent the whole night. Henry Lowe, the retired chief surgeon turned philanthropic icon. He cleared his throat softly and said, "Do you still have the bag I gave you?" I stopped. That bag. A canvas tote, fraying at the seams, handed to me the night I left Colorado. On it, a faded phrase, "We rise with roots." "I do," I answered. He nodded slowly. "I've been watching, just not speaking." I didn't know what to say. I only knew my knees stopped trembling. I made my way toward the door. My exit would be quiet, I thought, until Evelyn's voice rang out one last time. "Don't forget the 60th anniversary gala for Lowe Medical next month. Mother expects you there. Maybe wear something that doesn't scream, 'charity case.'" I turned around. No smirk. No rage. Just steel in my spine. "I'll be there. And next time, I won't be bringing a bag. I'll be bringing the truth." And with that, I left. They thought they had written my ending. What they didn't know is, I had just begun drafting the opening chapter of my return. I left the party without slamming a door, but sleep never came that night. I sat curled up on the futon in my DC sublet, 2 flights of creaky stairs above a dry cleaner, a world away from Aspen, and opened the old notebook I hadn't touched in years. Inside, the ink had faded, but the stories hadn't. Notes scrawled in margins, case numbers crossed out in haste, New Hope Refugee Camp, Alma, Jamal. No translator again today. 5 to a cell. Child cried for 3 hours. Each line a wound I had chosen, a weight I had carried willingly. I used to be top of my class at Yale, behavioral psychology. I'd been fast-tracked for a federal research fellowship, the kind that opened every door in D.C. They had me shadow a field team in southern Arizona, just to round out my theory with practice. That's where everything cracked. That's where I met Alma. She was 11. Labeled disruptive and kept in solitary, a misfiled case in a system that fed on silence. She didn't speak English, just wanted her mother. I watched a male staffer kick her duffel bag into a wall and scream at her. She flinched, then folded into herself like a broken bird. That night, I threw up in the dormitory bathroom. I don't remember eating. I just remember the sound of my own breathing as I stared at the tile, realizing I could never go back. The next morning, I withdrew from Yale. No farewell, no ceremony, just an email and a decision. My family thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. Evelyn was livid, tossing out lines like, "You're wasting every opportunity people would kill for." My mother didn't yell, she never did. She sat at the kitchen table and said, "If you insist on burning everything we've built, you must be dealt with." 1 week later, she suggested a voluntary psych evaluation. I was too exhausted to fight. What came next wasn't an evaluation, it was an admission. 31 days. Locked ward. The diagnosis? Oppositional defiance disorder with delusional reform tendencies. The term sounded clinical, but I knew better. It was curated, funded, framed. I could have sued. I almost did. But on the 6th day, my father visited. He stood behind the glass partition, white coat gone, sleeves rolled up, eyes sunken. He placed a hand on the glass and whispered, "If you still want to live, let this go." I nodded. I don't know why. Maybe I still needed to believe there was love somewhere beneath their rules. But something inside me died that day. The belief that love in our family could ever come without condition, without performance, without a price. When I was released, I packed what little I had and bought a one-way bus ticket to Washington, D.C. I created a new resume with a fake liberal arts degree from a nowhere school and took the first job I could get: inventory clerk for a nonprofit that ran outreach for displaced workers. No one asked about Yale. No one cared. And for once, that anonymity felt like freedom. I started again, rebuilt from the dust. I wrote grant proposals at night, policy briefs during the day. Slowly, I earned trust. Moved up. Projects for rural broadband access, food security for indigenous communities, programs for unhoused veterans, and post-pandemic reintegration. I was invisible, but I was building something that mattered, quietly, without the low name, without their shadows. Some nights, I'd look in the mirror and wonder if they'd even recognize me now. The girl they locked away had gone, but the woman who replaced her, she was sharper. She knew that justice didn't come through family legacy. It came through persistence, through survival. And I was still here. That, in itself, was a kind of victory. 3 years passed. Most mornings began the same: coffee from the cart by DuPont Circle, earbuds in, train ride to the outer ring of D.C., and a quiet arrival at the second floor of an office building no one cared to notice. That's where GroundPath operated. A policy think tank with no sign on the door, just a buzzer code and a coffee machine that brewed like it resented the job. I liked the anonymity. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to build something better than what I'd lived through. My official title was Policy Associate, which meant I wrote reports no one read until a crisis hit. But one document changed that. I wrote the first draft of Blueprint for National Reintegration, a massive post-pandemic welfare plan focused on housing, employment, and mental health for displaced Americans, veterans, caregivers, immigrant workers, people like Alma's mother. I didn't sign it Cassandra Lowe. I used the name D.H. Reeves, after my grandmother, a coal miner's wife who'd lived and died quietly in West Virginia. Her name opened fewer doors than mine, but it was honest, clean. The blueprint was picked up by the Department of the Interior. Adapted, quoted, broadcast. NPR ran a segment about it. The White House mentioned it in a briefing, but no one knew I wrote it. And I didn't care. What mattered were the results. The shelter that stayed open another winter. The hotline that didn't close. The mothers who stopped choosing between rent and insulin. Then came a Monday morning with a plain envelope in my inbox. No return address. Inside was a child's drawing, crude crayon shapes of a house, and two stick figures holding hands. The son had eyelashes. In the corner, block letters read, "You helped Mom. Thank you for not giving up on her." No signature. Just that. I didn't know who sent it. I didn't care. I slipped the drawing into my wallet next to my old Yale ID. One reminded me who I used to be. The other reminded me why I'd left. A few weeks later, I was in a staff meeting about municipal zoning reforms when my director, Martin, leaned over during break and said, "They want to meet you." I blinked. Who? Vice President's office. Human Resources called. They're reviewing appointments for a federal undersecretary role. One of the proposals caught their eye. He passed me a folder, thick and creased. My stomach tightened when I saw the label. Candidate, Cassandra Lowe. Proposal, author, D.H. Reeves. I stared at it. Somehow they'd traced the name back to me. I'd written under a ghost for years, and the ghost had led them here. I didn't know whether to laugh or bolt. That night, I opened my laptop, hands hovering over the keys. My instinct was to write to my mother. Not to gloat. Not to explain. Just to tell her. But as I typed the words, my chest went cold. I deleted the draft. Every line. Then I wrote one sentence and hit send. I will attend the 60th anniversary gala. Make room, I'm not coming alone. I didn't say who was coming with me, but I knew. I'd be bringing the silence they taught me to survive in, the pages I'd written in the dark, the child's drawing in my wallet, and the unshakable truth that I didn't need their applause. I just needed my name back. I landed in Colorado on a cold Thursday night, 2 days before the gala celebrating the 60th anniversary of the low care hospital system. The event wasn't just a family milestone, it was a stage. A grand, orchestrated masquerade, dressed up as a medical tribute but really meant to polish the family's public image. The state's lieutenant governor was on the guest list. So were several national health correspondents and the editor of Colorado Civic Weekly. It wasn't a reunion, it was a coronation, and I was the ghost they didn't invite, but couldn't keep out. I walked into the ballroom alone. My dress was navy blue, simple, wrinkle-resistant, no label, no makeup artists, no gemstone necklaces, just a worn-out Casio on my wrist and heels that didn't hurt to stand in. Evelyn was already there, draped in satin and smiling like she'd been born for a podium. When she caught sight of me, her smile froze for a second, then recovered. She leaned in just enough to stay off mic. "I hope you're not planning on speaking," she said through clenched teeth. I looked her straight in the eye and replied, "No. I'm planning to let them speak, until the truth interrupts." Mother arrived late, of course. Edith Lowe always did enjoy an entrance. She swept through the doors like she owned the building, which, technically, she did. Cameras clicked as she walked toward me, arms open. She kissed my cheek and addressed the crowd with a syrupy smile. "We're so proud of how far Cassandra's come." Then, as she turned toward Evelyn, she lowered her voice. "Keep her close, before she burns it all down." I heard every word, and smiled. They thought I came to pick a fight. What they didn't know was, I came prepared to win, without raising my voice. Dinner began. The MC gave a speech about the visionary minds behind Colorado's healthcare legacy. He named doctors, donors, even distant relatives. Not me. When Evelyn took the stage, she glanced my way just long enough to deliver her barb. "Our family has always been committed to service. My sister, too, in whatever corner she's been hiding in lately." Laughter rippled across the ballroom like static. A photographer flashed a few shots of my reaction. I didn't blink. I'd practiced stillness longer than any of them knew. Then, just as the dessert trays were being cleared, the back doors opened. A tall woman in a tailored black suit stepped in. Anna, my assistant. Her federal badge glinted from the breast pocket of her jacket as she walked briskly toward me. No hesitation, no theatrics, just clarity. "Secretary Lowe," she said, loud enough for the front row to hear. "The vice president has arrived. Your car is waiting at the gate." Gasps. Actual gasps. One reporter stood whispering, "That's Cassandra Lowe? The Secretary of Social and Civil Recovery?" The room exploded with flashes. The crowd turned. Conversations froze mid-sentence. And in that silence, I stood, smoothed my dress, pushed my chair back gently, looked at every single person who had ever rolled their eyes at my choices. "Thank you for the meal," I said calmly, "but I have a more important dinner waiting." Then I walked away. No rage, no dramatics. Just the soft click of my heels and the sound of 100 narratives rewriting themselves behind me. The next morning, I woke up to a dozen headlines blinking across my phone screen. "The secret behind the new Secretary of Social Welfare. Low Care's forgotten daughter. Daughter of Colorado's medical dynasty joins federal cabinet." From breakdown to breakthrough. The untold story of Cassandra Lowe. I had gone to sleep as a civil servant. I woke up as a narrative. But it wasn't the role I chose. It was the one I'd been cast into. And not everyone liked the spotlight shining in my direction. Within 48 hours, a column surfaced in the Centennial Ledger, a local paper long rumored to have close ties with the mayor's office. The title was practically a slap in the face. Can someone with a psychiatric history be trusted with national social policy? The byline was conveniently anonymous, the citations vague, but the tone, it was personal, precise, targeted. It reeked of Evelyn. I didn't need proof. I knew her style. Every line carried the same clinical malice she used when she dissected my life over Thanksgiving dinners. She'd weaponized my silence, and now she was daring me to scream. It got worse. 2 days later, I was in a federal policy roundtable reviewing proposals for post-incarceration reentry housing when Anna slipped me her phone under the table. I glanced down. A video was playing. Evelyn on Star CBS Denver Morning. "I love my sister," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face like she was mourning me. "But Cassandra has a documented history of self-harm. Our mother had no choice but to place her under psychiatric care. It was the only way to save her life." The host gave a performative frown. "Do you believe she's fit for her current role?" Evelyn hesitated, perfectly timed. Then she said softly, "I worry for our country." I handed the phone back to Anna without a word. My hands were cold, not from fear, but from memory. The sterile scent of disinfectant, the scrape of a leather strap being tightened around my wrist, the sound of a pen scratching across a form as my mother signed away my voice for 30 days. They said it was for oppositional defiance disorder, but really it was for refusing to follow her script. That night, Anna came into my office with an envelope. It was old, postmarked 3 days before the gala in Colorado. My name was written on the front in a shaky but familiar hand. Inside was a letter. My father's. He never used email, always pen and paper, like feelings needed ink to be real. "I wasn't strong enough to stop your mother," he wrote, "but I believed in you. Always. If you're reading this, it means you've already surpassed us all. Your mother doesn't hate you. She just can't bear watching someone walk off the stage of a play she directed." I sat for a long time, reading those lines over and over. It didn't erase what he didn't do, but it explained what he could never say. Later, as Anna prepared briefing folders for the next day, she glanced up. "You have choices now," she said. "You can forgive them, or you can make them bow." I looked at her, then down at the letter. My voice came out quiet, but firm. "I'm not going to scream. I'm going to be heard, with evidence." It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. And it had already begun. Exactly 1 week after the gala, things began to shift. Not loudly, not all at once, but with the slow, deliberate weight of a rope tightening. Emails from long-standing partners went unanswered. An ambitious reform draft I had submitted was suddenly put on hold pending further review. Budget allocations I had lobbied for, quietly shelved. When Anna entered my office that afternoon, her jaw was tight, her eyes scanning for cameras even when the door was closed. "There's a rumor," she said, placing a folder down. "They're saying you took funding from a banned international NGO." I didn't flinch. "They're also saying you signed sweetheart contracts for your own reform programs." I let out a breath, closed my laptop, and folded my hands. "No one inside this building started this." She nodded once. "I know." This wasn't a political play. It was personal. The whispers weren't aimed at my policies. They were aimed at my presence. It wasn't enough to discredit me. They wanted me erased, silenced, made into a name people were afraid to speak in meetings. I recognized the fingerprints, the precision, the cruelty in the pacing. This was family. The next day, IT flagged suspicious traffic on the department server. My official email had sent messages, dozens, corresponding with the representative of an outlawed foreign grant program. The messages were careful, crafted to sound just ambiguous enough. While I understand the terms are unusual, I believe we can proceed with a pilot program if discretion is guaranteed. But the IP addresses were wrong. They weren't coming from my computer. Not from anywhere in DC even. The metadata led back to Colorado. Someone had created a shadow Cassandra. Someone with access to my account structure. Someone who knew the exact kind of scandal that would trigger a full-blown ethics review and stall everything I touched. A few days later, I walked into a closed-door hearing on Capitol Hill. What should have been a strategic policy discussion became a thinly veiled interrogation. Senator Clay Whitlock, one of Colorado's more decoratively conservative voices, leaned forward with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "We have concerns," he said, regarding the Secretary's long-standing ties to global welfare funds, particularly those flagged by the Department of Homeland Security. I didn't blink, but I saw the flash in my mind, the way he had shaken Evelyn's hand at the gala, whispering something as they laughed over champagne flutes. This wasn't a leak. This was a pipeline. Afterward, Anna met me in my office with a new document. No commentary, just the paper and a sharp intake of breath. It was a scanned financial disclosure from the state of Colorado, a transfer memo. Public grant funds originally earmarked for research into mental health technology resilience, rerouted to a shell nonprofit. That nonprofit funded a group known for cyber interference campaigns against progressive think tanks. The signatory on the authorization line? Edith Lowe. My mother, with her pristine digital signature, clear as day. I don't remember standing or walking out. But I ended up back at my apartment well after midnight. I pressed the switch by habit. Nothing. No power. Management had logged it as a technical disruption. Sure. Convenient. Precise. I sat in the dark, cross-legged on the floor, jacket still on. I pulled out my wallet, slipped the small folded sketch from the inner flap. The child's drawing I'd received at Ground Path. Crayon scribbles of a woman with stars over her head, a little girl holding her hand. The note in that unsure, wobbly handwriting. You helped my mom get a home. Thank you for not giving up on her. The room was cold. My limbs ached. But that scrap of paper grounded me, reminded me why I was still here. Had I gone too far? Or had I only just arrived? I stared into the silence, then picked up my phone and typed a single message to Anna. Prepare the Colorado lawsuit dataset from last year. Don't release. Just contingency. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew I wouldn't let them write my ending. Not again. The next morning, my private inbox lit up with a single anonymous email. No greeting, no signature, just a subject line that read, "You need to see this." Inside was a video file clipped from one of the building's external security cameras. It showed Evelyn seated across from Senator Whitlock at a sidewalk cafe, both leaning in, heads close, like they were plotting the weather. Attached was an audio file, grainy but unmistakable. Evelyn. Take her down. She's not one of us. Whitlock. But she hasn't taken the money. Evelyn. I know. But she's not the kind of thing the Lows keep around. I didn't scream. I didn't send it to the press. Not yet. Instead, I forwarded the video and audio to an independent journalist, one I trusted to understand nuance. I didn't ask them to publish it. I simply wrote, I know. Then I sat at my desk, picked up a pen, and wrote a letter to my mother. I'm not trying to make you proud anymore. I've given that up. But I still hope there's a part of you that can stop, before we both go too far. No reply. Not from her. But 24 hours later, I got a phone call from my father's legal representative. My father, who I hadn't heard from in years, who'd vanished behind Edith's public image like a shadow. He wanted to meet. Alone. I arrived at the hospice center just before lunch. He was smaller than I remembered, thin and pale, with a scarf at his throat and tubes laced through his arms. He smiled weakly when I entered. "Cass," he rasped, voice scratchy from pain. "I didn't think I'd see you again. Not like this." He gripped my hand like he was still afraid of letting go. "Your mother doesn't just hate how you live," he said. "She fears that you're right, that you can exist without her script. She'll destroy you to protect what she thinks is family. And me? I signed those contracts back then, the ones that buried your options. I thought I could keep peace, but I was wrong." I sat there quietly, no judgment, just the hum of the IV and the weight of everything unsaid. By the time I left, I had everything. I had the video, the testimony, the paper trail. Enough to end careers, maybe even take down a dynasty. But that night, I looked out at the city lights and said to Anna, "If we win, it won't be with knives. I don't want to become them. I don't want to slice with the truth. I want to heal with it." She nodded, not as my assistant, but as someone who understood the cost. So I called the team, engineers, policy analysts, reporters who had quietly followed our housing initiatives, our food access trials, our prison reform grants. I told them we were going public, not with scandal, but with results. "We're going to show what truth looks like," I said, "measured in rooftops, in second chances, in lives that didn't end because we gave a damn. If they fall," I added, "it won't be because we pushed. It'll be because they chose the stage, and they forgot the spotlight burns." The day I was set to present my national reform package before Congress, the headlines had already been written. Secretary Lowe under scrutiny for illegal foreign funding. Colorado Senator calls for emergency suspension of social reform chief. Outside my office, reporters swarmed, microphones angled like weapons, cameras flashing like lightning before a storm. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just walked through them, calm, upright, breathing through the silence that wrapped around their noise. When I reached Capitol Hill, a crowd had formed, dozens, maybe hundreds, holding signs scrawled in red and black. "No to Secretary Lowe, traitor." At first, I thought I recognized a few faces, former beneficiaries of our early pilot programs, but their eyes didn't register me. And many of the others wore matching shirts, held signs with typos, shouted slogans in tones too rehearsed. Anna leaned in. "Paid protest," she whispered. "Group hired by an org tied directly to Evelyn." I checked. Inside the chamber, the temperature dropped. A senator stood, thick file in hand. "Madam Secretary, is it true that you were previously diagnosed with a mood disorder and placed under mandatory psychiatric care? How do we reconcile that with a position responsible for 40 million American lives?" Silence. Cold. Sterile. My pulse hammered in my ears. I clutched the edge of the podium, white-knuckled as memories surfaced. White lights. Restraints. The nurse tapping her nails against the clipboard like it was a warning. I couldn't speak. Not until Anna pressed something into my hand. A folder. I opened it slowly. Inside were printed statements, testimonies, first-person letters from those touched by our work. A man who once lived in his truck. "I survived winter 2021 because of the shelter Secretary Lowe funded." A single mother of 3. "I have a job now because she rewrote the hiring code." A veteran missing a leg. "I didn't kill myself because she showed up. In person." I looked up, cleared my throat. My voice shook but didn't break. Yes, I struggled with depression. Yes, I was hospitalized. But that's what allows me to understand what people truly need. Not pity. Opportunity. I don't hide my past. I built a future with it. Then I flipped to the last page. A budget report. Plain black and white. A detailed breakdown of misappropriated relief funds in Colorado. $18 million redirected from aid recipients during my mother's oversight as mayor. I didn't say her name. I didn't need to. I'm not here to clean my name, I said. I'm here to make sure this system sees the people it was built to ignore. The room held its breath. Then, slowly, a cane tapped the ground. An elder senator rose. Applause. A second, a third. A wave, not unanimous, but enough. When I stepped out, the sun was already shifting. Anna handed me her phone, a message from the hospital. Your father passed at 10:07 a.m. That was the moment I had stood up to speak. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. He saw me stand. He didn't need to hear what I said. A week after the hearing, the Department of Social and Civil Recovery was buried in letters, emails, and flowers. Journalists called me the woman who wasn't afraid to stand alone. People sent books, candles, poems. Some even left handmade bracelets at the door of my office. But I didn't feel heroic. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired and hollow. Every message, every card, every flower seemed to start with two words: my condolences. The official investigation into the Low Hospital network had gone public. Financial misappropriation, dating as far back as 2017, laid bare in spreadsheets and statements. The chain lost its licenses in 3 states. Stocks plummeted overnight. Reporters swarmed outside every building that once bore our family name. I watched it happen from my desk. And I whispered to no one. My family didn't fall because I destroyed it. It fell because I finally stopped hiding its rot. Within days, my mother was stripped of her acting mayoral role. She was charged with knowingly approving fraudulent budgets. Her first court appearance held in the very courthouse she'd once ribbon-cut in heels and a red suit. As for Evelyn, she vanished, deleted every social account, ignored all subpoenas. Last I heard, she was rumored to be living at a monastery in Vermont. Maybe seeking silence, or maybe hiding from it. That night, I sat in the dim hallway of the department with Anna. Just the two of us. The building was asleep, but we weren't. We didn't speak for a long while, and then, her voice broke the stillness. I was 17 when I ended up in a transition shelter. Domestic violence, she said quietly. You were the first person I ever saw who didn't just offer help. You believed we were worth saving. She paused. You didn't rescue me. You made me see I could rescue myself. I didn't say anything. I just reached out and pulled her close, and for the first time in months, I cried. Not for what I'd lost, but because I'd been seen. In the weeks that followed, I declined every interview, every exclusive offer. I withdrew from Washington's spotlight. I didn't want fame. I wanted healing. So I started writing. Pages and pages of what would become the charter for the Root Rising Foundation, a scholarship and training initiative for young girls from marginalized communities affected by broken systems like the one that nearly broke me. I funded it with the inheritance from my father. Not a cent of it carried the name Low. Not a single page spoke of legacy. It was about something else. Continuation. We based our first headquarters not in D.C., but in a sun-bleached town in Arizona, the same place where years ago, a small, worn-down refugee shelter had changed the course of my life. I don't remember the moment it all felt real. Maybe it was the sign on the building, maybe it was seeing the first application come in. But I do remember this. For once, I wasn't bracing for the ground to fall away. I stood in something solid. I had lost my family. I had lost my father, the only one who ever tried to understand. I had lost whatever place I might have once held in my mother's heart, likely forever. But I had found myself. I didn't do all of this to become Secretary Lowe. I did it for the little girl who once stood outside a psychiatric ward, begging the universe to send her someone, anyone, who would believe she deserved a life worth living. 1 year later, Washington, D.C. wasn't home anymore. The high-rise apartment with the view of Capitol Hill now belonged to my successor. I lived in Arizona, where the sun didn't pretend and the air never lied. The first root-rising location had just opened in a public high school that had lost its funding a decade earlier. We painted the walls ourselves. We patched leaks. We rewrote lesson plans by hand. A year since the hearing. A year since my father passed. The launch ceremony wasn't glamorous. No cameras. No velvet ropes. Just a crowded school auditorium filled with young girls who had once known what it was to be forgotten. They waited in line after the speech just to say thank you, each voice shaking but proud. Their names weren't known. Their stories hadn't gone viral, but they mattered. I was halfway through my remarks when someone slipped quietly into the last row. I knew the silhouette instantly. My mother, Edith Lowe. She didn't wear red. She didn't wear power. She wore a gray coat and silence. No one noticed her. No one welcomed her. She didn't expect to be welcomed, and I didn't stop talking. I kept speaking of justice, of possibility, of trust, the kind that cannot be bought or coerced. When it ended, I looked straight at her. She didn't cry. She didn't bow her head. She didn't smile, but she nodded. Just once. Not an apology, not forgiveness, but not denial either. That nod was the only acknowledgement she could offer, and it was enough. After the ceremony, Anna handed me a worn envelope. "We found this in your dad's things," she said. Inside was a short note scribbled in fading ink. "Cass, if you're reading this, it means you've faced your final fear. Don't ever let the world convince you that compassion is a weakness. It is the greatest strength you have." I stood there with tears sliding down my face, but this time, they weren't bitter. I had once been called a failure, a disappointment, a traitor to my own blood, but now, I was a survivor. And more than that, I was someone who had chosen, fully and finally, not just her own name, but what it meant to carry it. Family is not where you're born. It's where you dare to love, even when love means breaking. I stepped out of the auditorium. No cameras, no speeches, just sunlight. And me. Finally, just me. Sometimes the deepest strength is born not from victory, but from survival with your soul intact. Life will try to define you, bend you, erase you. But the power lies in choosing who you become when no one is watching, because dignity isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply endures. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, follow, or subscribe. Your voice means more than you know.